far as that goes, because one of the things that, and I know that we experienced a loss of time, because you had your CPAP machine hooked into the my electric system there, and I was trying to just get it all aligned to figure out how long my batteries would last, because there's no electricity or running water up there or anything like that. It's pretty remote. And so we were trying to figure out how long we could get it through. And so when you got up and went out and came back, I was working on this thing the whole time. Now, Sam remembers it being a certain amount of time, and I remember it being at least what I would consider to be half an hour, but probably more than that, because I remember trying to deal with this issue that I was trying to deal with, and I almost went into like a trance state, if I could, if I could say that. I don't know how else to describe it. But whenever you came back, I asked you specifically what time it was, because I wanted to see how long the battery had lasted. And you looked at your watch and you said it was 4:30 or something.
Yeah.
And then whenever the machine had turned off for you at 3:30. So we were all experiencing different periods of time. One of the things that I wanted to mention too is that I don't know if you realize this too, because whenever Troy had his experiences with the different tracks and things like that, I had actually gone outside with I brought everything. I mean, I brought every piece of equipment I had, even though I normally don't do that. I brought the trail cams and everything, and I put the trail cams out behind the trailer. And what was interesting about it is that when I had done that, I took it outside, strapped it to the tripod in the trail, and then I opened it up and turned it on and then closed it. Well, I don't know if I ever told you this, but the next day, whenever we came back from that trip as well, because I'm just starting to, that's the funny thing about this. And I don't know, maybe Mary can speak to this, but I'm starting to put things together after the fact, like bits of memories start to come in. I know it happened, but I didn't know what time it happened in certain directions. But I had come back, and she had, what had happened was somebody had come around the back of the camera and actually opened it up and turned it off, and then left it open. So something was manipulating the camera as well, and so and then whenever then we had woken up the next morning, and we were all sort of befuddled, and then we got down to the place where the cameraman and the sound man were, and the sound engineer was very befuddled, and had a lot of experiences, trying to explain what he believed had happened, because he was the one who first of all had said, I think we kind of talked about the fact that we had missing time or some kind of a anomaly, but then whenever we went down there to discuss it the next morning, and then he said he had missing time that he said was an hour, then I think we all kind of the hairs went up on the back of my neck, and because it was he wasn't with us,
Yes.
And then when we were talking about the difference in time, and it was the same thing. The son said it was 10 minutes, and Sam said, it's 15 minutes, and then we were like, well, it was an hour, and then Dan said it was an hour, and then next thing you know, it's then we were all kind of looking at each other like, well, what's going on? And then it was at that time that I think that we had come up with this idea to use a magnet or compass to try
to check out the magnetic anomalies. Yeah. Well, listen, before we're going to bring Troy in too to talk about some of the magnetic and the Bigfoot as well, because he was down there kind of doing the Bigfoot thing at the same time. And that's fascinating, the story that you said where your trail cam was actually turned off. But at the same time that this was happening to us, Lee Strauss was on top of the mountain at about 10,000 feet, and he was sleeping overnight with another camera guy and Philip Wade. And Lee, do you want to tell us the strange story that your cameraman up there told about this light that was flashing you guys on your tent up at that level?
Yeah, so we were in separate tents. Camera guy and Philip were in one, and I was in another. And apparently, in the middle of the night, there was a light that came over the top of the tent, and our camera guy looked at his watch. I think it was like 2-something in the morning or whatever, and that's just from memory. I don't, recall exactly what time it was, but I think it was around 2-something, and he didn't mention it till the next morning. But the thing is there's these rock walls that they have built up around the tents up there because it gets so darn windy on, close to the top of the mountain. It gets really, really breezy, blow your tent away. So they build these round things up there with rock, and you put your tent inside and you're snug as a bug in a rug, hopefully.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the light came right over the top of the tent.
So some kind of a light was playing on the top of the tent, and you guys were up at that level anyway, so something had to be up in the air that was flashing you guys at that point.
Right. The climbers, usually if you're going to summit, you wake up around 12 o'clock to summit in the morning. That way you can see the sunrise. So the time would be about right for light there, but the fact where the light was coming from was a little odd.
Yeah, and then tell us also what happened when you guys noticed that Philip Wade had some kind of a wound on his back in the morning when he woke up.
Yeah, actually, we didn't realize that right away. We didn't realize that he felt something, but we didn't realize it until we got back down to the cars. And then he had mentioned something, and then we had him later on that day, once we separated, take some pictures of it and send that to us.
Yeah, and it looked like there was some kind of a big welt on the lower part of his spine.
Yeah, right on the spine.
Yeah.
Yep, that's correct.
Now, that was happening at the same time that the other things were going on down there at Takalak Lake. And Troy, I want to bring you in as well at this point, because you were quite adamant. You and Ray and Sam Beagle were talking around the campfire till about 3 a.m. Tell us about your experience at Takalak Lake Campground that night, Troy.
Yeah, so I'll paint the picture. We were at a campfire after the other, I believe, 3 or so people who started the campfire with us had left. It was just down to myself, Sam, and Ray, and we sat there for a good 2 to 3 hours, probably 2.5, after everyone else left, talking about things, telling stories, sharing strange experiences and things like that, such as we would do at a campfire in the woods. And at one point, it wasn't too long after it was just the 3 of us, Sam, who is Kevin's wife, was off to my left, or seated directly beside me to my left, and Ray was seated on my right, and it was just Sam and I who happened to look up from the fire at just the right moment, directly in front of us, pretty much 12 o'clock in front of us in the woods. First of all, it's thick woods, fairly thick woods anyway, where the campsites and campground is. And that night, it was just a few days after the full moon. So the moon was still mostly full, very bright, and the moon was so bright that it was shining bright beams of moonlight through the trees. So the forest was pretty much all dark, except for certain patches of the forest floor where there were moonlight, and it was quiet. The forest was fairly quiet around us when we weren't talking. And Sam and I at one point just happened to look up at just the right moment to see some movement. It was fairly quick, like less than a second, I think. Just from right to left in our field of vision. And Sam saw the silhouette. I mostly saw the shadow projecting and covering up a lot of the moonlight on the ground that was coming in from behind it. And that's what caught my attention, because I hadn't seen anything else in the forest making such big movements, at least no large objects or creatures. I may have seen a little of the silhouette, but it was mostly the shadow that caught my attention, and Sam saw the whole silhouette. The next day, she said she thought it was probably about 10 feet or so tall, maybe 9 to 10 probably.
Yeah.
Based on the estimations of a white camper that happened to be there the next day with a family that rolled in the next day. They weren't there that night, not as far as I remember. Okay. It was all quiet. That area was clear. It was like 50 feet or so from our campsite number 12.
Yeah. Okay, Troy, well, let me stop right there, because what I want to do is recap. So what you guys were doing, it was about 2 or 3 in the morning, I understand. You're around the campfire still. Everyone else has gone to sleep, but it was a full moon, and you're seeing something moving in the shadows between the trees in the moonlight that looks very large and quick, sounds like.
Yes, and silent. It did not make any noise when it was moving quickly, which was
Isn't that
odd.
Interesting? Yeah. And, oh my goodness. And then, of course, Kevin will also corroborate this, is that, and I'll just wrap up this part of the story, but we had numerous magnetic anomalies around the campsite that night as well, where in the morning after we had this missing time episodes, multiple missing time episodes, we were talking about the issue that there could be some kind of a vortex or something around the area. So we all brought out our compasses. I think there were 4 of us at that point, and we set each person around the perimeter of the campsite. And at one point, we all said, okay, everybody point in the direction that your compass is heading, is telling us north is. And when we did that, all 4 compasses were pointing in a different direction around the area there. Of course, we thought, well, it could be a vortex magnetic anomaly in the campsite, but no, it was like, a matter of fact, we even thought maybe one of the cars was a magnetic anomaly as well. And sure enough, Dan Weiss's vehicle, we found out, cut to the bottom line, was it turned into basically a bar magnet, where the front part of the car was one polarity and the rear end of the car was another polarity. And it didn't happen to be with just, the area. It had something to do with the entire area that we were in at Takalaka Lake. So we got, Bigfoot activity. We got UFOs caught on tape, basically, and up close and personal, less than 2,000 feet elevation. And then we've got magnetic anomalies. We've got missing time, by the way, that was corroborated because when the battery died in Kevin and Sam's trailer that I was using for my CPAP machine, at 3:30 in the morning, I woke up because the battery looked like it was dead. And so I decided to go out and go to the restroom real quick. And I swear I was only gone for a minute, maybe 2 minutes at the most, just going to the porta potty outside of the trailer. And when I come back, I'm surprised to know